is the Vintage RPG Podcast, your source for the best in classic and contemporary RPGs. With your hosts, Hambone and Stu.
Welcome to the Vintage RPG Podcast, coming at you again from the clubhouse, hidden somewhere in the swamps of New Jersey. I'm John Hambone McGuire, and with me, as always, is the founder and publisher of Unwinnable. The only time he ever goes to a mall is if there's a Lego store, Stu Horvath.
It is really in this modern era the only reason to go to a mall. There's nothing good at malls anymore. And in my day, I say as I shake my cane and adjust the bugle in my ear so that I can hear, there were bookstores in malls and they were great. There were electronic stores too. There was so much promise in a mall in the 80s, wasn't there?
Yeah, I mean, there's bookstores, toy stores, comic stores, electronic stores, Sam Goody.
Now there's nothing in a mall.
Nothing.
A Lego store if you're lucky.
Yeah, Lego has become even bigger than ever. Let's be real. Lego was always huge.
Yeah.
However, I think had a new renaissance over the pandemic where people were like, well, screw it. If I can't leave the house, I'm going to become a master builder. And, there were Lego stores in different malls around here. They had one in Short Hills. They had one in Paramus Park Mall. But now they're more prominent, more everywhere, and people are really getting in on that Lego. But enough about Lego. What are we talking about today, Stu?
Well, we're talking about sort of three things. Prime among them is the pamphlet Dead Mall, which I got recently and I'm kind of excited about. But before we can talk about Dead Mall, we got to take it back to Nate Treme and his game Tunnel Goons, because Dead Mall is a hack of Tunnel Goons. So Tunnel Goons is I'm looking at it in his book, The Haunted Almanac, and it's a 2-page spread. Super simple. These are mechanics that are basically a super simple distillation of D&D so that you could get to the table and play D&D-like adventures as quickly as possible with as little difficulty as possible. All right, so you roll 2d6 for everything, right? You have 3 skills: Brute, Skulker, Erudite. Brute is good at smacking things. Skulker is sneaking, and Erudite is thinking. Most of those you have 1 or 2 points in, and you add that to your roll. If there's a difficulty scale, so easy is 8, hard is 12. If you beat it, you pass. Simple, right?
Yeah.
You have 10 health points. You can have a little bit of inventory. There is barely anything here. Super flexible, and it is the core of Dead Mall, which it says right on the cover is a Tunnel Goons hack by John Patrick Cooper, put out by Dystopian Games. It's pamphlet, 3-panel, folded. And the idea, I'm just going to read it. In Dead Mall, you and a group of stalwart friends decide to go check out a mall that went out of business years ago. It may have been your local mall. It may be far from home. You're exploring an abandoned mall and something sinister is on the loose and coming for you. Easy.
Love it.
Then it goes on to restate the Tunnel Ghoul rules. It tidies them up as if you could tidy something with 2 pages. It just tightens them for the concept of being an urban explorer. It says Dead Mall is analogous to Dawn of the Dead, so zombies are a given, but there's lots of room to get creative. Why is the ghost of a Cinnabon employee of the month roaming the halls looking for revenge? Can you help her find her final resting place? I love that.
I can think of a lot of reasons myself, but yes, go on.
And then the thing that really set my heart apace was the fact that the back is a 2-panel 100 entry random mall generator that is basically just a list of mall stores, and just a list of mall stores, not fake mall stores. like Pathmark is on here.
Really?
Camelot Music, Red Barn, Cinnabon. I love it. I love the fact it doesn't filter it through kind of any parody. It's just goes right for that sort of capitalistic, nostalgic jugular vein.
Kind of like when you saw the mall for the first time in that last season of Stranger Things. Yes, we didn't have as much neon in our malls in the 80s, but man, when you walked into the mall, it was something. Your local strip mall had a bakery where you knew the baker. You may have had a small chain supermarket, maybe a couple restaurants, Chinese restaurant, and a 5 and dime.
Yeah.
That's what you had at the local mall. I think it took us in Clifton, I don't know, it was a couple decades in before they put a Radio Shack in that strip mall and a Coconuts music store. But when you went to the mall, the mall, it was something else. Now, granted, we had 2 malls nearest to us. I mean, well, in fairness, now living in Kearney, you have the Jersey City Mall, but
Yeah.
really for me in Clifton when I grew up, it was Willowbrook.
Yep.
And it was Garden State Plaza. Now Willowbrook was, you went in, you're like, oh my God, they have an arcade. But when you went to Garden State Plaza, it was like a monolith to commerce, like,
Oh yeah.
it was like, oh my God, there's 2 levels, and it goes in a circle. It's just wild. It's wild when you think about like how big it was to you when you were younger, but now you're like, oh God, I don't want to go to the mall. My God, anything but going to the mall now.
I don't know if we talked about this on the podcast, but I went to that abomination over in the Meadowlands.
The American Dream.
The American Dream. What a nightmare that place is. Like literal nightmare place. Curved walls everywhere. So you don't have any kind of sense of place or direction. It's awful. There's so many people just milling about aimlessly like zombies.
Yeah, it's a long way to go to get a Wetzel's pretzel and some Legos, man. I feel you.
Oh man. So that's basically it. I love the fact that the Topiary and Planter are both on the random encounter list.
Do they have a Delia's or Hot Topic?
They have Kenny Rogers Roasters.
Oh, even better. Even better.
Hot Topic does seem to be like weirdly missing. It's hard to scan this though and be definitive. So keep that in mind, folks.
That's fair.
There's a Chi-Chi's, Photomat. I feel like that's reaching back deep into the past. Photomat.
Yeah, I mean, Kenny Rogers Roasters is definitely like in the way back machine, but man, the Photomat and the Ticketmaster kiosk. Because you used to have to go to the mall to buy
go to the mall to get
tickets.
your tickets. God, what an awful setup. So Dead Mall is great. I think that it's like a great little micro setting for Tunnel Goons. I think that it's fun. It makes me want to play. I don't even know what I would do. I would just be like, let's make some explorers, and we would do it on the fly. It just makes me want to play, right?
Yeah.
But then on top of that, there's a zine-length adventure called Satanic Panic at the Crowley Mall.
Oh, yes.
Also by John Patrick Cooper, that really, really like brings it all together for me. And it basically is just, it uses the mall as a dungeon. There's undead in there. There's a so the idea is that there's this evil satanic doctor whose wife died in a very Dr. Phibes like accident, and he sells his soul to Satan to try and get her back. And of course things don't work out, and he becomes like this necromancer, and he's camped out at the mall, and it's filled with ghost zombies. His wife is a white, and you guys just came to the mall to break some windows and drink some beers, and now you got monsters you got to deal with. And I just love that idea. I love the idea of the mall as sort of like ruined temple of capitalism. The commentary, it really is like Dawn of the Dead, where it's just the symbolism's right there. It's not even subtext, it's text.
Yeah, I mean, well, Dawn of the Dead is really the OG when it comes to that idea.
Yeah.
And I will maintain, and I will die on this hill, that it was perfectly executed in that movie. Like there was truly something special about them really beating you over the head with that message in a very gory fashion, but not feeling like you got beaten over the head. Like you felt like you had been through a slog with these people who were trapped in this mall, living life in this mall. It's interesting. It's wild. I mean, I think that from watching that movie, like before I started playing Dungeons and Dragons, you really do get a good indicator of what a dungeon crawl looks like.
Yeah.
In the Monroeville Mall.
And this basically captures that feeling again and repackages it for you. It's just great. It taps to that weird New Jersey urban legend kind of vibe too, because like there was a mass murder at the mall and then it closed. And then like a dungeon, there's a key to all the rooms. The rooms just happen to be shops and stores that you recognize the names of, like KB Toys, Wallpapers to Go. The Kenny Rogers Roasters starts off with, you're not sure what happened, but this roaster seems like a mass grave. I love that.
That's fantastic.
It's
That's
so good.
Just on so many levels great.
Room number 19, Cinnabon. This Cinnabon has an aura of foreboding doom. This just gets at something that makes me so happy. It's so stupid, but so good. A special section for the central fountain in the atrium.
Oh, you gotta have a fountain in the atrium.
Of course.
It's got to be like littered with like pennies that are just green.
Dried blood is smeared across it, and a crude pentagram is etched into the fountain base. Like, of course there is. A corpse lays upon the altar. Like, I love it.
Yeah.
And of course, the bad guy is holed up in the Montgomery Ward. Like,
oh, of course.
Anchor store.
Of course. And for those listening at home, the Anchor store was always a big retailer that really it tied the mall together on either end of the mall. So in Willowbrook, we had Sears on one side of the mall, we had Macy's on another side of the mall,
and I think there was a Nordstrom's up there too, isn't there?
That came a little later, but yeah, we got a Nordstrom's too. So it was like, and I'm terrible with direction, but if you could imagine, like, Sears is north, Macy's is west, Nordstrom's is east. There was nothing really at the south per se, but there was an offshoot mall in another parking lot that you had to drive to that had a Fortune office and a service merchandise.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's where the Borders went in eventually.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I miss Borders bookstore so much. But so the anchor stores here are the Montgomery Ward and Pergabit's Home Improvements.
Yes.
On either end of the mall. And like, again, I don't know how much longevity a game of this would have, but I think that it would just be like a nonstop laugh fest, like a bunch of snot-nosed punks fighting monsters in an abandoned mall. Like, sign me up. I'll do that for real. Do we have it? Like, Mill Creek Mall is probably abandoned, right? We can go in there.
I don't know. That's a little further south than we generally go. I love this kind of stuff. And that's why I love indie games, because indie games are like, well, we can just hit the button and just put whatever we want in here, like Kenny Rogers Roasters. And, definitely, I think that I can't presume that the person who wrote this game is our age, but I can imagine that they are, because if you're dropping Kenny Rogers Roasters, you're an OG, that's a really small moment in time, I feel like. Yeah, for real. Oh, that's so cool. I love this. I'm definitely going to check this out. I mean, you had me at Nate Treme right in the beginning, because what a genius. I follow Highland Paranormal Society, like, across the board. Yeah. And it's like, he's like drawing stuff on TikTok now. He's like constantly putting out content. And if you haven't checked it out yet, there is that beautiful tome that he put out. I know they had an Exalted Funeral for a while with all these different, like, little adventures.
He thanked me in that.
How wonderful.
I don't know why he did that, but it was the nicest thing in the world. I like, thank you for thanking me. And at some point I do want to do like a deep dive into that book, because it's fantastic. It's full of awesome stuff. But
yeah, so I mean, if you can find it, probably at Exalted Funeral, because you're going to spend your money there anyway. Haunted Almanac is great because it is a book of instant fun and lots of different kinds of fun, lots of different kinds of flavors of adventure and like mini games and stuff. The best way I could describe it, I would definitely pick that up if you have the opportunity.
100%. And you can get all of this stuff, I think, at Exalted Funeral, Dead Ball and Satanic Panic. That's where I got them. And I just want to underscore the fact that, like, Tunnel Goons, 1-page spread.
Love it.
Both sides. Dead Mall, front and back of a tri-folded pamphlet. Satanic Panic at Crowley Mall is like 8 pages in a zine format. You're looking at like less than 12 pages for like at least 2 nights of fun.
That's so cool.
You can't beat that. Yeah.
You really can't. And zine makers out there, any of our listeners who are zine makers, if you're looking for some really professional looking trifold brochure pamphlets to print your games on, Mix'em is about to start doing it.
Of course they are.
Well, it's great. I mean, listen.
No, it's great. I love Mix'em's product. Good for them. Seeing that's where people are going. It's
super smart. And as a person who uses them, and again, we're not sponsored by Mix'em, but Mix'em, if you want to send us some money, we'll take your money. But as a person who uses them to print up all his books and zines, I will tell you that there is a quality there. And price-wise, if you like price it out versus like printing them yourself to hand out, or just ordering like 100 off of Mix'em, you're going to be happier that way. So yeah, keep an eye on that, zine makers, because that's going to be the hot ticket coming up this summer when they finally unlock the trifold. It's there on their site. You can't get it yet. So I'm actually going to call them and be like, yo guys, what's up?
They're teasing.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like, for an independent publisher, I look back to that box of Star Wars figures. You got the box, but you didn't get the figures just yet, and you got really hyped the whole time for it. Well, for me, it's like waiting for trifold pamphlets to unlock. Anyway,
I used to say zines were the future, but maybe pamphlets are the future now. I don't know. It's a weird world. It's getting weirder.
It's a challenge to write them because you could only fit so many words and art on 3 panels on each side.
Writing short is hard because there's no room for BS.
No. And you got to cut a lot of words down. So,
yeah.
Anyway, Stu, do you have any final thoughts on Dead Mall?
Check it out. It is a symptom of a greater fever dream of the current state of independent role-playing design. I just love the fact that like we're at a spot where we can get weird ass games like this that are so specific and so low barrier to entry. Like I love it. So good.
You know, low barrier to entry, lo-fi, high concept, can't miss.
Yep.
Well, that was another amazing episode of the Vintage RPG podcast. Stu, where can the people find you?
They can find me on Instagram at Vintage RPG. And I actually just slotted Dead Mall and Satanic Panic at Crowley Place Mall into my 2023 Instagram posts, because that's what I'm doing this week, is figuring out what I'm going to do next year.
Very cool.
Because I'm a lunatic.
Well, speaking of things that are on the horizon, Stu, what is the name of your book?
It is Monsters, Aliens, and Holes in the Ground, a guide to tabletop role-playing games from Dungeons & Dragons to Mothership.
Thank you. It is no longer tentatively titled Experience Points. If you want to learn more about it, you could check it out on our Patreon, patreon.com/vintagerpg. We got a behind-the-scenes look at Stu's book. We have a behind-the-scenes look at 321 Action. We've got an early release episode set up every week. And we got a killer Discord community that we'd love for you to be a part of. So much more. Patreon.com/vintagerpg. If you want to goof off with me on the internet, you can find me at John McGuire RPG across social media. That's TikTok, that is Instagram, and that is over on the Twitters as well. If you like the show, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe, because your reviews really do help other listeners to find us. So for Stu Horvath, I'm John Hambone McGuire. May the dice always roll in your favor.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Every review helps other listeners to find us. The Vintage RPG Podcast is a ham-fisted production. Music by Dega West. Art by Schaefer Brown. If you like the podcast, you should also consider becoming a patron at patreon.com.